well-chopped comfrey leaf or root mixed in until it becomes a paste. It was identical, word for word, as I had given it in 1968. God, the great universal mind, whatever you want to call it, had brought it from Germany, where it had never been taken out and written for printing, to me in Utah. And I gave it. And it has aided many thousands of people. Many thousands of people. Wonderful part about it is, you put it in a wide jar and screw it down tight and use it. And you can use it over and over and put the lid back on, and months later you can dig down in there and use it. We had a bottle of it under the sink, practically forgotten about, and the wife was doing something with the dehydrator. It was a big old ugly dehydrator we had, and she was trying to adjust the fan or something, and all of a sudden it kicked off and took her knuckles off, and they bled, you know, really poured out. And so she rushed in and got under the sink and got the comfrey paste out, put over it, not a scar, stopped the bleeding immediately.
What would cause a baby and a young child from not eating? Most of the child's life, it was, if there was any eating, it would be meat and milk, and that was force-fed. Nothing else would be touched.
The question is asked with an infant up to into the childhood stage, doesn't want to eat, period. And if it's force-fed, why the parents fed it the miscellaneous merchandise that wasn't the best in the world. If you wish for a baby to, or a child to start eating, a child up to 104, give them the liver gallbladder the formula and stir up the liver, because there is where dormancy generally starts. This is one of the finest things in the world. Your barberry is the base for it. But this has stepped up appetite with so many. Just getting that liver functioning.
Do you know why a child wouldn't want to eat? I mean, it'd be like literally days.
She says probably it knows better than what's being given. I like that. That was classic. But really, when a child has no appetite and does not desire to eat, it means that the body functions are such that they're not craving. Mm-hmm. They don't desire. They don't demand certain things, and the liver is not functioning properly.
So it's a malfunction.
It's a malfunction.
I see.
No.
My mother would be happy to hear that.
You know, it'd be wonderful if I could get that malfunction for a while.
Now I wish I had.
I didn't enjoy eating so much. I'm a traveling born gourmet, and that's the worst thing in the world. And it would be wonderful to get a little of that malfunction. I'm just being facetious, but I mean get that liver functioning. It used to be years ago in my practice, if a child didn't have good appetite, we would give them a little barberry tea, which is very nasty. It's one of the nastiest teas you can get. But whether they ate because it cleaned up the liver, whether they ate so they wouldn't have to get any more of the tea, I don't know. But it always started their appetite going. When we go in, we're still talking a little on the subject of comfrey, because it is such a great herb. There is one thing about comfrey, and that is it is so highly ignored and so easily left so that it goes wild. If you are wise and you know where there is comfrey that's growing now, start harvesting it. We are coming to a time very shortly of a 7-year drought, when the first year 25% of the crop loss will show, the second year 50% crop loss, third year 75% crop loss, the fourth year, it'll be a dust bowl. And it'll take 3 years to reestablish. It will pay to have your fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds stored. Be in readiness. And during that time, when it is a dust bowl, there will be no herbs known as weeds grown. And those are very essential. So it'll pay to have your herbal aids stocked up. Someone is saying, I should have some slippery elm. Yes, you should have a number of these that we've talked about today. A number of them. It's an emergency. You don't know. But what? Someone very near and dear to you will have a heart attack tomorrow, tonight, day after tomorrow. Has some cayenne handy. We don't know, and only the angels of heaven knows when we are going to have that plague hit. Plague, plural. It's going to hit, and when it hits, it hit hard. Are you ready for it? Let's get ready. That's all I can say. I would rather us all be in readiness for 40 or 50 years and not even need it than to not be ready and need it tomorrow. It's better. An ounce of prevention is far better than a pound of cure. Let's put it to use. Comfrey, a person has a severe cut or a burn or they're scalded, and all of a sudden we think, gosh, I haven't got time to mix up the honey and the wheat germ oil and make the paste. Have it ready. But if you don't have it ready, be sure you've got some comfrey growing out in the backyard or in a pot in the apartment. And it's amazing what can happen. I remember a couple of my students were out in the yard one day in between classes and at home. They were at home and they heard a scream, and they looked out, and one of the teenage boys or preteen boys had fallen out of the tree and split his head open. And the blood was running down all over his face, and the mother fainted. And so, thank goodness, her friend, the other herbalist, grabbed some comfrey and just bruised it right fast and put over the head and stopped the bleeding right now. It works this fast. And bandaged it up. Well, they got the mother back too again. Now, we laugh at this. This sounds so asinine and ridiculous. People have called me from thousands of miles. My line, when I would allow to have a line that wasn't unlisted, I'm sorry, but it had to get that way. It was hot all the time during dinner and all continually. Well, what can be done for this? What can be done for that? And I would put it out right now. Do this, do that, do this, do that. No problems. But one of my kids gets sick and I go to pieces at the seams. And my sweet wife takes over. Bless her soul. If it wasn't for her, I guess my kids have all been dead by now. She takes over immediately because I panic. This is horrible. This is ridiculous. But I can't help it.
I had an interesting evening yesterday. When I came back from classes here, my daughter was laying on the sofa burning up with 103.4, and she's a teenager. And I started, she's very stubborn, so it's very hard to get her to do anything, and I was thinking about this cold sheets reading and all. And I couldn't get her into that, but finally I got her to do part of it, because I thought, well, part of it would be better than nothing. So I got her in the tub with cayenne, and that's all I had at home. And so she was in that for quite a while, and meanwhile I was serving her raspberry tea. And then couldn't do the sheet, the cold sheet, so I took just the towels and got them really cold and got that on her after she got out of the tub. And then I wrapped her up and got her back in the sofa and covered her and got working on her feet and with olive oil. And then the garlic paste. And then the cotton socks on top of that. And she was just shaking her head and thinking, you know, saying I was crazy. But meanwhile, her fever was just going down so much. And she could sit up. She couldn't when I came home. I mean, she was ready to pass out. And she was sitting up. She says, Mommy, you know, we are already laughed at because I'm so strict with the diet and everything. But she says, now it's really getting bad. But I said, you're getting better. Yes, I know, she said. And then my 11-year-old came crying and saying, Mommy, knee is bleeding. She had hurt herself. And it said, it's bleeding.
Such blessings.
I said, I can't stop it. And I said, oh, great. I said, let's go in the kitchen. and I took her out there and sprinkled cayenne pepper on it. Mommy, that hurt was crazy. It's burning. But I said, look, it stopped bleeding immediately. And I just wanted to say this because this is the first time I have not panicked when my children get sick or hurt or whatever. And I was glad and I felt happy. And I said to them, both of them, girls, I thank you for letting me practice on it. It's just great, and I feel confident about that maybe I can handle these situations.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like that. Well, maybe one day I won't panic when my kids get sick. Anybody else in the world I don't have any problem with, but my own kids. But you know, I did feel awful about this for so many years. And I found out a doctor friend of mine had the same problem. And I found out another one did. So I guess it's just one of those things. Yes, this was a blessing to you to see that some of these things actually work. You hear about them.
I was able to make a poultice too with the ones around her glands because they were swollen. And that was helping her too. She says, gee, I'm feeling better.
Gee, a built-in clinic.
Another thing, my husband got so impressed that he said, sign up for the next course and, you know, get going with it. And that was the biggest...
We got to give that one a hand. The winner. Oh, that's terrific. We had you speak of the bleeding stopping in a hurry. I was giving a series of classes in Salt Lake, and this man, a barber, told his wife he figured she was wasting her time coming to my classes, and but he would support her, as he told me later, much later, years later. He said, you know, she isn't a slave, she's a pet, and as a pet, I thought I'd pay for the classes, just to keep her happy. Well,
what are you going to do, though, where no pets are allowed?
So one day they had a beautiful home, and
No women would be able to come in.
and they had a toddler, and this little tyke was playing around and fell and cut her head open on the fireplace. It was a stone fireplace, and the father went to pieces. He said, get the ambulance. He said, get the doctor, get somebody quick. And his wife said, oh, I've been to these classes, forget it now, I'll take care of her. And she put her under her arm and carried her into the kitchen. And she had some powdered comfrey root there. And so she took the comfrey root and put it on the baby's head, put it on good and thick and made a paste. Stop the bleeding right now. And he said, oh, all right, you stop the bleeding, let's go get it sewed up. And she says, oh, time for her to go to bed. So she put a Band-Aid over it, put her in bed. And he told me later, he said, I wasn't a bit concerned. I was only up every half hour to see if she was still breathing. I knew it had killed her. And it was the first child, and he was really at his wit's end. But she just slept right on through. And the next morning, she said, when he said, all right, now, we've all had a good night's sleep, let's go get it sewed up. And she said, honey, this is a baby, and she's a good, healthy baby. And I put the comfrey on. Let me show you something. So she said, I was brave. I didn't know whether I dare or not. But she said, I pulled the Band-Aid off, and it was all healed. She said, there was just the little faint mark there of the final healings overnight. She said, that baby was so clean and so beautiful, and it healed so quickly. And he said, well, when's that next class? She said, tonight. He said, don't you dare miss it. He said, by the way, here's a couple of free tickets for him to come in and get haircuts. I need them once in a while.
That's because he gets so smart he has to go.
That was the first child that they had. I saw him a short time ago. I dropped into the Roadway Inns to get a haircut, and he said, oh, I'm glad to see you. He said, we have 6 now. We are in a new home, and he said, we have a ½ acre of garden, and about 1/3 of it is herbs. He says, I'm really sold on it. All right, over these years, these things happen, you know. Comfrey is so great. Just don't sell it short. It's high in allantoin. It's extremely high, but it is also a cell proliferant. It'll drive off the bad cells and make the new cells come in stronger and better. This is an herb that the Lord was kind to leave it with us. And I am so grateful that it's being used now in an abundance. So don't be afraid of it. And if you're afraid that it's going to crowd you out of your home and garden, just do a little extra harvesting, dry it, and keep it on hand. And if you've got too much dried and on hand, our post office box is 352 Provo, Utah. We'll help you get rid of it. Now, this group of herbs, I think as we've gone through them, you've seen how valuable they are. I'm going to talk now just a little on nervines and antispasmodic herbs. This group of herbs here are such that we'd be lost without them. Now, I explained slightly a little how we handle this nervous system that we have got. In each individual's body here, we have, in each one, we have miles, not yards or feet, but miles and miles of nerves, nerve capillaries, nerve lines, and the body is so dramatically built, so completely computerized, and so perfect that we've got to keep it in good condition. We have a number of herbs, nervine herbs, that cannot be done without. They are so valuable. You know, things move smooth for some people. We never have a dull moment in our area, and my sweet wife takes care of her part of it. We don't have 2 people doing the same job, and so all the worrying I assign to her. And she walks the floors nights, and I wonder if we're going to make this payment or that payment, or I wonder about this or wonder about that. And she gets to a point where she's just weary, and yet she can't sleep. Well, one of the early things we taught her was to use valerian tea. Valerian tea. This is just an herb, but I'm citing this one because if you're brave enough to drink it, you're all right, because it tastes like someone washed out some dirty socks in the water. It's the most horrible stuff. In fact, we had a shipment of valerian tea come into our post office, and they got fouled up on where it was to go. And it had been in there for days, and finally they located us, and we came in, and my wife went in to get it, and the whole post office stank of it. Well, the odd part about it was when she said, Oh, I'm Mrs. Christopher. I came for the herb shop to pick up. Oh, thank you, boys. She's come. And they bring over the herbs and shove it out the window and say, thank you. Get it away as fast as you can. When I'm talking about the stage of valerian, I'm not kidding. It's awful. And so whenever she gets really upset or nervous or worried or has walked the floor too long, she takes a cup of valerian tea, conks out, and she doesn't know anything about the valerian tea now. She's got her sleep. It's precious. And every one of these nervine herbs have a specific use. Some of them will rebuild the sheath that's worn out on the nervous system. Those nerves are hanging down in our body in various places like wires hanging down in the attic, and they rub back and forth, and the sheath gets worn off, and they've got to have a rebuilding job. Some of these nerve herbs are for this. Your mistletoe is almost pure nervine, yes.
Would that be in the case of a tic douloureux, which is a rotted nerve in the face?
No, that stems back to the motor nerve again, because you can oftentimes with tic douloureux work on the specific area, and it doesn't do as good a job as when you go back to the source. This is why we use the B&B tincture, and we have seen immediate results with some on this. Now you can use that plus the nerve combination of the 9 nerve herbs. One takes care of the medulla oblongata and this area through here, the spinal cord, and the 9 nerve herbs take care of all the rest of the nerves in the whole body.
Question on mistletoe. It seems like when we use it in such small amounts because in large amounts we've seen grogginess go on for so long. Is this something you've noticed?
Yes, definitely, and that's why in our combination you notice we have 1 part,
Okay.
2 parts. It's an 1/8, a 1/16, or it is a small amount. There is an amazing thing about herbs. They like to work alone, but sometimes they are a little obnoxious. They are like in a quartet, and one of them, the voice shrieks out. So we mix our herbs, and it's more like a choir. They are molded. They are more perfect and more beautiful. We have to be careful of these herbs that are so rough to take, and then that's why we have our modulation. But listen to the unusual names of nervines: the skullcap, valerian, lady slipper, mistletoe, wood betony, cramp bark, so forth. Each of them have an odd name, but that name signifies main things for it. Your cramp bark is an antispasmodic that cannot be exhaled. You can use this with such great results. The hops. This one on hops. We have an herb here that will rebuild the sheath so fast. It is one of the great aids. Hops are valuable. Of course, they're raised for many things besides putting into nervine. When we were in Olympia, Washington, I was practicing there, and it was during the war years. And I had so many patients that were worried and one thing and another. I used to make, besides giving them the 9 nerve herb formula, I would make hop pillows for some of them. And you know, just the essence from the hops coming through there, they would sleep with such ease. And I needed so much in the hops, and a friend of mine who was in the same ward I was in said, well, look, you're paying so much a pound for your hops. Why don't you come on down to the brewery? He said, I work at the Olympia Brewery. And he said, I can get you a big gunny sack full of these hops for 75 cents. I'm coming. And so I left Olympia and went on down to Tumwater to get these hops. As I drove down to Tumwater, as I looked, it was beautiful scenery, and up on this side, there was a big hill, and there were pine trees all around here, and it looked so beautiful. And I thought, gee, that'd be a nice place for me, bring the wife and kids down, and we can have a picnic up there. Well, I'll go check it out after I get the hops. So up there was the area that I was looking at, and right on the other side, down here, was Tumwater, and here were the signs, Olympia Beer, it's the water. And it was all in neon. Very attractive. So I went down and I got my sack full of hops for 75 cents, and quite pleased. So I went up to see what the park was up there. It was the city cemetery for Olympia, for Tumwater, and it was an immense cemetery. And here it is up here, and the artesian wells for Olympia Beer is down here. And this is where the water comes for Olympia Beer. And the drainage, of course, would come down this way. And so the thought came to me, yes, it does have, with hops, so many values, but one of them is they're so soothing on the nerves if they're not mixed with beer. Your cohoshes are valuable in biological reproduction where we're having children. The cohoshes are extremely valuable. The 9 nerve herbs that we have, one night I got a house call in Salt Lake. The man said, Dr. Christopher, could you come up to our home? It was around midnight. I said, yes, what's wrong? Well, he said, my wife is an instructor at the East High School, and she's been a very good wife. But she's got to a point now where the students won't even tolerate her. And she has agreed that we can sign her into the asylum because it looks like she's going crazy. We'd like you to come if there's any way and try a last chance on her. And I said, yes, I'll come up. So I packed my bag and went up there. She'd been pacing the floor. She would walk the floor by a half hour, 3/4, and then she'd doze off for a couple of minutes, and she'd walk again. As long as she ever would doze off, it'd be 20 minutes. So I had told them to have hot water ready when I got there. And I took a teaspoonful of the nerve herb combination, put it in the cup, and poured the boiling water over. Thank you. And as I poured the boiling water over, I put the saucer on top, and we sat there while it steeped. It was strained, and I told her to sip it. And she did, and in a very, very short time, she said, I'm getting a little drowsy. I think I'll go lie down for a minute or two. And I said, well, I'll leave. It's getting late, and I've got to get back. And her husband said, now I asked you when I called you to see that there was no drugs, no poisonous, nothing that's addictive. And I said, look, it's an innocent tea, there's no problem, don't worry about it. And he looked at me dubiously, and she said, well, wait just a minute or two, I'll be back down, I just want to doze for a minute or two. And I said to her husband, I don't think it'll be a minute or two, I think she'll be quite a while. So I went home. Next morning at 8 o'clock, this man called me. Dr. Christopher, you told me that there were no drugs, that you didn't use any knockout drops or anything else. She's still asleep. I've got to waken her to get her to go to school. Are you sure? I said, of course not. There's nothing in those herbs that are toxic or poisonous or habit-forming. And you can give those herbs to a small infant, and it will not harm them. Well, all right, but I've got to go wake her up. That woman was completely healed. She didn't go to the asylum. she continued teaching until her years were over. These are just samples of nerve herbs, yes.
Story for your herbs, your nerve vine.
All right.
I work with a lady who has 2 cats, and she's had one.
Can you all hear back there?
I work with a lady that has 2 cats. She's had these cats for about 10 years. They're just part of her family. And she was talking about them one day, and she said that the one cat had had a terrible fright when it was just a little kitten. And from then on, had been just a nervous wreck. But she had the cat this long, and she didn't want to do away with it. And she was actually afraid of this cat. I mean, she was fending her off with the broom. And it would attack people when they came in. But she never knew when this was going to happen. So I said, well, you know, I'd do away with a cat like that, put it out of her misery. She said, I can't do that. I said, okay. Sounds like she has a nerve problem. Why don't you give her some B vitamins? She said, well, I give her pet vitamins. I said, well, then give her some herbs. And she looked at me, you know, pretty sure. I gave her a concerned paper, so she read about it. She went to the health food store and got an equivalent to the Relaxes. And so she gave put a little bit in the cat food, and the cat can only smell it and walked away. And so she dumped that out and put a little less in, and the cat came over and walked away. So she put it up on the refrigerator where this cat had a familiar place, and that was her safe place. So the cat ate it. And she said, you wouldn't believe the difference in that cat. She could live with the cat now. Every day she gives that cat a quarter of a capsule of that Relaxes to keep her from tearing up the book.
All right. I like that. You know, we sometimes don't think much about animals because they're just pets and around. But those animals are very near and very dear and very close to us. And after you've spent time, as I have, on a lecture platform with people that can talk to animals and can converse with them, it'll change your opinion. There are a number of books out on it now, and it's getting to a point where we can understand that there is more than meets the eye. And when a person can talk to an animal and that animal will answer them and do the things that they asked him to do, then maybe we're to a point where we can read a book that I would recommend to everybody, and that book is The Secret Life of Plants by Christopher Bird and his associate. How many have read it? Isn't that a great book? That makes you appreciate herbs like you never did before. Yes.
You promised you were going to sell them here, and you don't have them.
Oh, is that right?
What is that?
Secret Life of Plants. They're on the price list. I don't know when they weren't included.
Well, heads will roll. I mean,
We still have a bunch of.
all right. That's a great book, folks.
Would you use this combination for depression as well as for anxiety? I mean, I gathered that the lady was very anxious and restless, and that soothed her and made her sleep. But would you use this combination for deep anxiety?
Definitely deep anxiety. Yes, you see, what we're working on is the cause.
Sorry, deep depression.
Depression, the same. We're working on cause. And the cause is in the nervous system. So whether it's depression or whether it's anxiety or whatever it is, it's a nervous malfunction. And so we're going to feed those nerves. And that's the key to our whole program, is going to the cause and feeding the source that is not functioning properly. Yes, this is beautiful. This lineup on herbs, one of them is lobelia, which is an antispasmodic. Lobelia is an herb that we'll never know all the answers to because there's always a new one coming up. Lobelia is one that I haven't completely fathomed, as many herbs are. But I remember I was down in Arizona, and I had finished a lecture series and had everything packed, and we were heading for the airport. And someone there cut their hand open with a piece of paper. And you know, a paper cut can be very, very nasty and very painful. The cayenne was packed, everything was packed. And I was flabbergasted. I didn't know where to turn. And one of the men looked up on the shelf, and there was a part of a bottle of tincture of lobelia. It had been used for something, and it was sitting there. And he said, would lobelia work? And I said, I never heard of such a thing. But let's try it. We took the tincture of lobelia and poured over the wound, and stopped bleeding right now. Right now, it stopped. And I was flabbergasted. I'd never heard of such a thing.